I've had my ups and my downs.
Phelps with 10 meters left. 3 minutes too good. The crowd roaring. Freeman wins gold.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Listeners, welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show, the show that takes you behind the scenes of how the world's top and most inspiring physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs and the lows of the journey in getting there. Listeners, I hope you've had a great week. Thanks to everyone that's been leaving reviews for the program and reaching out on social to let me know that you're enjoying the show, also messaging the guests themselves. That's awesome, really terrific, and greatly appreciated. It's something that really encourages myself and also is a nice little way of thanking the guests for their generous support of the program. So thanks to all the listeners that are doing that. And guys, I hope you enjoyed last week's episode featuring the first Olympic gold medalist on the Physical Performance Show, Mr. Matthew Belcher. What an incredible story Matt shared around the beginning of his sailing career right through to the double Olympic medal takeaway from 2012 and 2016 Olympic campaigns. And I hope you got the same level of inspiration out of that I took in bringing you that interview. So massive thank you to Matthew Belcher. If you're yet to catch up with that episode, jump back and listen to the previous episode with Matthew Belcher. You'll find that on iTunes or on SoundCloud. Or if you subscribe to the app, you'll get that automatically, obviously, in your feed. Guys, thanks to the generous reviews that have come through in the last week. A massive shout out to Wimmera Wiz, who gave the podcast 5 stars. Love these inspiring stories from athletes with such diverse sporting backgrounds. Fantastic to listen to the highs, lows, and everything in between while punching out some kilometres of my own. Wimmera Wiz, thanks so much for that review. Also, big thank you to MJB0579, who rated the Physical Performance Show 5 stars. Great insight was the headline. With poise, Brad graciously and skillfully prompts athletes to paint a vivid picture of not just their sports involvement, but the way they balance their lives. A great listen. Thanks so much to both listeners for leaving those reviews. It's very much appreciated and certainly helps the program get more visible. Today's show is lovingly brought to you by POGO Physio. We're the physios that help you perform at your physical best. We do this through our industry-first, fixed price and unlimited access finish line programs. We work towards a set end date for your physiotherapy with unlimited access to hands-on treatment and state-of-the-art active rehabilitation. Why? Because we don't care about the number of sessions you have. We only care that you get your result, either getting out of pain or back to your physical best. That's the finish line difference, and we love it, and we hope you do too. So let's jump straight in with Chloe McCardel. I hope you got your goggles on. Chloe McCardel, it is great to speak with you again. It's been a few years since I saw you when you were, for a period of time there, training on the Gold Coast. What year would have that been?
That was 2012, the year that I had my first attempt at a triple crossing of the English Channel.
Yeah, so that was 2012, and we'll go through the chronology because your bio, as per my introduction, is absolutely remarkable. So we want to unpack these great achievements. Chloe, first question though. You know, you've got the world's longest unassisted swim at 128 kilometres, the most Australian crossings of the English Channel at, I believe, 21, unless you've added more to it since I did my research. Is it 21, Chloe?
It is at 21.
21. And yep. Many other accolades. What's one thing that scares Chloe McCardel?
Swimming with crocodiles, saltwater crocodiles.
That's understandable. Have you actually experienced that, Chloe?
I've swum with, I think, 100,000 freshwater crocodiles in Lake Argyle, But they don't mention that when they're promoting the swim. They only tell you about that afterwards.
Oh my gosh, how far was the Lake Argyle swim?
They had various distances, but I did the 20-kilometre course. So it's fresh water, which means it's much heavier on your shoulders because it's less buoyant than salt water. So it was quite challenging.
Oh my gosh! So and you saw them while you were swimming, obviously.
I didn't see any of the crocodiles. No, I don't think they're like humans.
Oh, well, that's comfort. So Chloe, let's talk about obviously your remarkable career, which there's still chapters being written. Chloe, what's the genesis story? As I'm aware, you grew up swimming and even dabbled in triathlon and even ran a marathon in a decent time, Chloe, through your formative years. What's the genesis story of your successful, marathon swimming career? How did it all start for you?
Well, in grade 6, when I was at primary school, the school implemented swimming as a part of the physical education curriculum. So we were bussed off to the local pool and we were split into different groups depending on our swimming ability. And I didn't know how to swim, and I didn't know that it was normal for kids to go off and have swim lessons for a couple of years. So I didn't know how to swim, but most of my friends did, and I was a bit embarrassed. So I said, Mum, can you put me in out-of-school swim lessons? Because the school ones, they don't really cover a lot. And she said, yeah, sure. Sorry, we kind of forgot to teach you how to swim. And I was like, oh, yeah, I think you did forget. And then I loved it. So within 12 months, I went through every learn to swim level. And I really did start with just the basic level 1 of, what do arms do? They go around in big circles when you try and swim with a kickboard. So I went from, a kickboard with big straight arms. And within 12 months, I was in the first level of squad. And then within 12 months of that, I was just on the verge of finals for state. So it accelerated pretty quickly, my entry into swimming in the competitive world. And from then on, I was a competitive swimmer in the pool up until I turned 16. Actually, no, I wasn't even 16 when I quit. I think I was 15 and a half. And I loved racing. I loved training even more. I loved pushing myself, pushing my boundaries, trying to get better times. And I didn't care so much whether I was the fastest in Australia or the fastest in my age group. I just wanted to keep pushing myself. So even at a young age, I felt this urge, this like existential urge to see what my boundaries are, what my limits are. And I liked racing, but it didn't eat me up that I wasn't always winning, because I was always improving and I really liked that personal challenge. But as I said, I gave up at 15 and a half because my parents said that I had to. And then I was a bit lost for a few years.
So, Chloe, you were 15 and a half, and I find it fascinating that even at that young age, you had, I guess, made a delineation between what you just described as an existential urge and the affinity for the personal challenge as opposed to the pure competition. So that's a fair bit of self-awareness for a 15-year-old, right?
Yeah, it was, because my parents were good enough to say, look, we're happy if you're in a recreational swim squad 2 or 3 sessions a week, we'll support you, we'll take you to the sessions and all that. But they didn't want me swimming 7 to 10 sessions a week with all the gym and weights and things. And I understand where they're coming from, because I was exhausted. Like, it was taking up every bit of energy I had week in, week out, 48 weeks of the year. Yep. But I was lost because I did have a challenge previously that kept me so focused, and I was so committed. It drove me through each day and through the year. So even though it was a stress on my energy and a stress on my time, I actually still held fairly good grades because I was in such a good headspace, and I used my time quite effectively. And then I was much less focused and lost after I stopped competitive swimming, so I didn't even use my time more effectively. Yeah,
right. So you stopped swimming, and obviously the affinity was there for the water. So what was what was your first marathon, like your long distance swim, open water? Can you remember the first, I guess, moment where the bells started to tick that, like, this is something, one, you're really gifted at, and two, that you really love and wanted to do more of? Was there one event in particular for you, Chloe?
Well, I trailed off, as you mentioned earlier in the intro, into a bit of triathlon and ran a marathon. So once I started uni, which was 17 and a half, for about 3-4 years, I was still searching for that sport or that challenge because I wanted to be at an elite level, even though I wasn't sure that racing and beating other people was necessarily my primary drive.
Yep.
So I was a bit confused about what was going to be best for me. So I entered that marathon run, and I entered the marathon swim. So it was a Melbourne Marathon, October 2016, and the Bloody Big Swim, which is Frankston to Melbourne, 11.2 kilometres, January 2007, sorry.
Yep.
We're back in the O's, the noughties.
Yeah.
So 2006, 2007. And that Bloody Big Swim, which is 11.2 kilometres, I absolutely loved because I wasn't confined to, the concrete walls of a swimming pool. There was no chlorine, no artificial sanitation. I was out in the real world in a natural environment, buoyed by that salt water and that connection with nature. I didn't see any sea creatures that day, but I really felt that this sport was something that I really loved. And it really worked to my strengths, which was a huge background in pool swimming, which is, strength work, technique, conditioning. It was something that I performed well at. I won that event, but I also loved. So I think that it paired the two things that I was looking for, like a personal challenge, because it's marathon swimming, like running. You're really pushing yourself as far as you can go.
Yep.
And also that affinity with the water and nature.
And so that was your first foray, and I guess it started what's become a career-long love affair with the open water and the distance, right?
Yeah, it did. That really kicked things off because once I won that swim, I thought, well, what's the pinnacle of open water swimming? And the answer was already there. It was the English Channel. And then I signed up to the English Channel to swim it in 2009. I've never really looked back, and I've been there every year except 2013. And the great thing these days is that I can go and push myself, push my boundaries and the boundaries of marathon swimming as a sport. And I can also coach and guide and mentor and have an amazing time in Dover and across the English Channel with people that I train now to swim it. So I can live my own dream, and then I can also help and encourage and support people to reach their own dreams. So it's a sport that is really given to me as an athlete, but is also now giving to me as well as a coach. So
yeah, that's terrific.
I've really found a really special place.
And we want to absolutely unpack that the difference in in for yourself and now for others as we go. That's going to be great. Chloe, the English Channel. I mean, as an Australian, I don't know if it's possible to grow up in Australia not having some sense of, one, recognition, and two, national pride of our English Channel record. I mean, obviously the greats of Susie Moroney and Des Renford. There's obviously a rich legacy there. Did you grow up as a girl knowing some of their achievements and success, and what was the first thing that really turned you on to the English Channel? You said you knew the moment you won that race, you knew what the pinnacle was. So how did your awareness start of the English Channel?
Well, I grew up in the 90s, so I definitely heard of Susie Moroney, but I didn't really know much of the story. I assumed she'd swum the English Channel. I knew she had a profile for doing great marathon swims, but the swimming squad that I was in a very small world of school and swimming, and the swimming squad I was in didn't encourage open water swimming and didn't really, teach us about the history of open water swimming. It was all about, the pool swimmers, the greatest Australian swimmers that have ever been. So there wasn't really that, appreciation for the diverse legacy that, marathon swimmers have given to Australia and the world, Australian marathon swimmers specifically. So I didn't really know a lot about the sport. Never swum in open water as a teenager, which is a real shame.
Yeah.
But I kind of figured out that the English Channel, it was the pinnacle. And I had not heard of Des growing up, which is such a shame because he did so much for our sport.
So, Chloe, to give listeners a bit of a perspective, there's overseas listeners to this program, there's lots of Australians as well, but the English Channel, can you just outline a little bit of what one crossing entails in terms of, temperature and, conditions and distance, etc. Can you just outline a little bit of what it takes for someone to get across one crossing, and then obviously we'll unpack your double crossings, your triple crossing, etc. So what does that entail, Chloe, for someone to get from one side to the other?
So the quick snapshot is you need to be trained up for the worst day that the English Channel could throw at you, because then you know that you can swim it on any day that you're given. So you've got to be ready to swim 34 kilometres plus, because that's the straight line distance. So you're really swimming, in effect, 40 to 45 kilometres continuously. You're not allowed to get on the boat in water that varies between 14 to 16 Celsius. So water temperature, it feels much colder than the same temperature in air, because water takes away heat from your body much more effectively than air. So it's very cold water. It's a long way. The English Channel is renowned for being rough water because of where it's situated, squeezed between two oceans. So you're looking at 2-metre waves probably for half your swim if it's going to be a bad day. And the mental challenge of having to overcome all this when you've got jellyfish out there, you've got flotsam jetsam, which is things floating around, you're swimming in pitch black, and for so many hours on end. So it's a huge physical challenge, but just as much it's a huge mental challenge, and it's so unique. There's really no other swim like it in the world. So training up for it is something that is really important, not to just worry about, well, I've got to swim in the open water and swim in the pool. It's how do I do all the little 1% things that are going to get me across the channel, because it's often those small things that really get a lot of people undone if they go to the channel and they're just really not prepared for what the channel has to throw at that day.
Because I believe there's more people that have climbed Everest successfully than have swum the English Channel. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, wow. And I mean, I earlier in the program this year caught up with Alicia Azar, the youngest girl to summit Everest, and you look at, it was 3 attempts for Alicia, to get to the top, and so it's an incredibly arduous, obviously undertaking for you. What was that first one like, Chloe? I mean, what was the emotion like getting to the other side? Were you successful on your first single crossing, Chloe?
So just going back a little bit to that first swim, I did the bloody big swim, and that was 11 kilometres. I was training with a group of people, and about 4 or 5 of them had swum a single crossing of the English Channel. And I felt that comparing myself to where they were at, knowing that they'd done singles, all of them successfully, I felt that I really could give 2 crossings in a row a good shot. So I signed up for a double crossing for 2009. So that first crossing I ever did in the English Channel was my warm-up crossing. That was lap 1 of a 2-lap, a goal that I had. So I swam to France, I got out, I was like ready to start the channel swim now, because I didn't want to go in with the mentality that doing one was achieving something for me, because I needed to have all mental strength and stamina for that second crossing. So that's the first crossing, there was no celebration. I didn't let myself, think that I'd achieved anything per se, except that I'd done my warm-up and then the crossing was starting. So I just cleared water, got back in and started swimming towards England.
My gosh, so that your warm-up, so your first crossing was the warm-up and you're heading back to England, and how did the return journey go, Chloe?
It was terrible. The weather turned. It was shocking. The weather turned at about hour 19. So my first crossing was done in 12 hours and 3 minutes. Wow. And so from then on, I'm in my second crossing. And I'm swimming. And then, as I say, from about the midway through that second lap onwards, I was just getting pummeled by 2-metre waves. So it was Beaufort Force 4 and 5 conditions. I was into the night, so a full night of swimming for hours on end in pitch black. It's the only thing I could compare it to, even though I've never lived through this, would be something like solitary confinement, when you're just deprived of light, deprived of, just simple basic creature comforts. And it's so much about what mind is at, and just keeping on, putting that pressure on and keeping on moving forward stroke after stroke. So it was really hard. It was really tough. And by hour 25, my crew said, look, we don't think you're going to make it. With these 2-metre waves, you're making hardly any progress. It'd be 8 hours or more for you to finish this crossing. And that was already the 25-hour mark. So they pulled me out of that, which was devastating, and that was my first kind of complete experience of channel swimming. I had the crossing, which was kind of like a success, but for me it wasn't. It was just I reached the halfway mark. That was great, but I didn't reach my goal for that channel swim.
And so off the back of 2009, Chloe, you then went back successfully in 2010 and 12 with the double crossing before we obviously arrive at the triple crossing, which we'll get to. So the next year you went back and redeemed the double crossing, right?
Yeah, I did, and it was doubly sweet because there were people criticising me on online swimming forums, saying, "Who's this young Australian who's, got very little marathon swim experience, thinking she can come over here and do a double crossing in the English Channel on her first attempt in England swimming the Channel?" And it's interesting because these people have opinions, and most of them had never met me, didn't know my swimming ability, and hadn't really bothered to investigate my swimming background because they couldn't find any records of me swimming in England or the US. Therefore, they thought I didn't have much of a swimming background. So when I went over and smashed it the next year in 21 hours 48, that was a double crossing. And it's not uncommon for someone to do a solo one-way crossing in 21 hours.
Yeah.
It was great because, I didn't let those critics drag me down, because I had to make a reservation straight away at the end of that 2009 unsuccessful double. I had to reserve a 2010. So It was literally like the day after that was unsuccessful, I had to make a decision. Am I going to invest 10,000 Australian dollars just for the cost of the swim, just to go back and have another go, knowing that there'd be no guarantee of success? It would just be another attempt at it.
So Chloe, successfully done in 21 hours, just remarkable. What's next then? I mean, double crossing, you've proved the critics wrong, all the naysayers, and they've now got a name in front of them that they can't ignore. What came next? Obviously, the triple crossing popped into your mind, right?
I got into English Channel swimming. I didn't even know people had done continuous non-stop swims before a triple crossing. I knew that Susie Moroney was the only Australian that does it, and that I'd hopefully be the second person to do that. But I didn't know anyone in the world could possibly do 3 in a row. And once I did that double crossing, I was absolutely exhausted. But I thought possibly I could do an extra crossing. And so I started working towards that. I attempted it in 2012, the year working with you briefly in the Gold Coast. That was unsuccessful. In fact, it was disastrous. I got a horrible day. I was just extremely hypothermic and sent to emergency in England in hospital. Wow. 2013, I took the year off the English Channel. I just needed a break. 2014, I did the world record longest swim that you were talking about. It's actually 124 kilometres in the end it was ratified at.
And how many hours for that triple crossing, Chloe?
36 hours, 12 minutes.
Wow. So you've gone across 3 almost in the same time that you prorated out the double crossing. That's just remarkable, right? That was the first triple successful crossing, from my understanding, for like a quarter of a century. Right, no one had done it. Yeah,
the last person that had done it was 1990 when I was 5.
Wow.
So it was a long time ago.
And who was that, just out of interest?
Could have been Philip Rush, because he's one of the 3 people that have successfully done triple crossing. He lives in New Zealand. That could have been him in 1990, but I'm not sure. There was 2 others who've done it. It was either him or one of the other 2.
Yeah, right. And Chloe, this 124-kilometre swim, just put listeners in perspective, where did that take place, and what was the impetus for that? I mean, that's the world record. That's 41 hours of swimming as a runner. I've run 50 Ks and I was spent. My mind boggles, Chloe, that it's physically possible to swim 124 kilometres. So where did that desire come from? Was there a record you were trying to break? Can you give us a bit of an insight into that one?
Well, I needed a break from the English Channel after 2 unsuccessful attempts at 3-way continuous swims. So 2011, 2012, and I was burnt out mentally. I've been doing so much training, and I was actually quite strong, quite fit, quite fast, but I wasn't able to produce any results that would reflect all the work that I've been doing. And it's not just me, it's the whole team around me helping me. You know what it's like because you're a part of so many people's team. Yep. And I wanted to be able to show that I could do something great, even though in the Channel, my last 2 attempts just had not worked out. And I was kind of over cold water swimming because there's so much to get ready for a long, cold distance swim. So I was doing 6, 8, 10-hour cold water swims in things like 12 to 14 Celsius, which is just torturous. And I wanted to maybe enjoy my training a little bit more. So the Bahamas is warm. The water temperature was 27 Celsius. The air temp was 27 Celsius as well. So it was what we predicted, which is like the water temperature is the same as a normal swimming pool that you would go to. So most people wouldn't find that warm, but when you compare that to the English Channel, that is a warm water swim. So I wanted to prove that I could do a record swim, do it in warm water, and I wanted a break from the English Channel. And the Bahamas is quite a different sort of world than in England, and and the swim was a different animal altogether. And I really got what I needed, which is something that I could call my own, something that historically was a great swim and that allowed me to have a mental break from the Channel.
Yeah, wow. And how do you fuel yourself on such a long, I was actually gearing up for this morning, mentioned to a patient I had here at the physio practice that I was chatting with you and who's into endurance sports, and, his response was 124 kilometres. How do you fuel yourself? Like, what do you take on and what's your routine like there, Chloe, to keep moving?
Well, I rely on sports supplements like marathon swimmers and Ironman athletes would. So I use sports gels, which have got energy in the form of short-release, long-release carbohydrates, and also protein for energy release. And also with that, we mix it into warm water because the English Channel water is so cold that warmth and energy is actually pivotal to keeping warm and keeping the core temperature warm so that you don't get hypothermia. Or in my case, because I'm out there so long, to delay the onset of hypothermia as long as possible. And those feeds that we call them, they happen every 30 minutes or so. And it's mainly liquids, and it's in a drink bottle, and my support crew, which is usually my husband Paul, he lowers that down from the side of the boat because I'm not allowed to touch the boat, I'm not allowed to get on the boat. So we need to find a system that allows me to tread water so I still remain completely immersed while I'm having those very quick feeds. They're only about 20 seconds, and then I keep going.
Wow. So by the end of 41 hours, you would have, I imagine, I know what it's like, in a marathon, I don't want to taste another gel for weeks. It must be magnified by the time you've got no more glucose. So, Chloe, just remarkable. And I've got to ask, this swim in 2013, the record attempt from from Cuba to Florida, without obviously the protection of a shark cage, what was the impetus for that one? I mean, that's quite a unique swim, right? 2013. Oh
yeah, well, it was unsuccessful, and as you said, I was trying to swim between Cuba and the USA, which is really, it's 100-mile plus swim.
Wow.
In a straight line. No one had done it before under traditional marathon swimming rules, which is bathers, goggles, and cap. So it means I couldn't use a shark cage. I couldn't use a stinger suit, two of those things which Susie Moroney used when she crossed between Cuba and the USA. So it was the swim really that put her marathon swimming on the map, and because she met Fidel Castro at the end, and that was a time when there was tensions between the US and Cuba. So it's an iconic swim. It's a famous swim, and God, 100 miles. It's 160 kilometers. It's a huge swim. Like, it's longer than I've still swum now. So I would have loved to have completed that swim, but there are so many box jellyfish out there. They at night time, on the first night, they just rose up from underneath me and they just covered all of me, and I was just getting poisoned, and it felt like burns, like extensive burns, because the venom was so strong, and it was injecting into my skin and all the entry points with those tentacles are touching me, and I couldn't even scream. I was in that much pain by the end of it. So they were dragging me onto the boat, and it was another disaster, really.
And Chloe, I mean, to give listeners perspective, we're not talking about one sting and you're out. Oh no, I just got stung by a jellyfish. You would have endured those stings for how long were you putting up with it before you literally got dragged out of the water?
Well, the first one hit under my armpit, under my right shoulder, and it just paralyzed my shoulder. So my muscles felt tight, so I couldn't actually do arm strokes. I was kind of swimming with my left arm only. And I was yelling to my husband that I've been stung by jellyfish and I'm not sure I can continue swimming, because I knew that I still had about 80 miles to go. And if I can't do full arm strokes, how can I make the swim? And he's like, oh, I'm just going, it might go away. So I'm doing this strange half paddle with my right hand, but then full strokes with my left arm. And then there's more of them kept coming at me. I was in the Gulf Stream and they ride the Gulf Stream, so I was just getting creamed with them. And after about 30 minutes, he let me get out of the water. We didn't really understand the gravity of the situation. We'd done research as much as we could, but being based in Australia, it was quite limited what we could understand. And the information we were getting was they are not out in June. That's before they hit the season. And they come later in the summer over in the Northern Hemisphere. But they were definitely there in June. And it was unexpected, and it killed the swim.
Oh, gosh. So from there, obviously, the triple crossing came after that. So there was, still so much ahead, which was such a great success for you. Chloe, let's do a performance round. So just some sort of training related questions here. The first question, what's your most disliked training session?
Well, I don't like breaststroke. So breaststroke set is the main set for a session, which for me is very rare now because they're specialised to what I do. Then I would probably cry.
So no breaststroke.
I would cry.
And Chloe, leading
breaststroke.
No breaststroke. Leading into your swims, I mean, to give listeners a perspective, if my memory serves me correct, in 2012, where I did a little bit of work with you when you were on the Gold Coast, it wouldn't be uncommon for you to swim in the vicinity of 10 kilometres morning and afternoon. Is my memory serving me correct?
It is serving me correctly. So some of the sessions I did when I was up in the Gold Coast, it was 11 kilometres in the morning session, and then 7 kilometres the afternoon session. But it was too much for me to handle. I ended up getting injured and therefore going into your clinic. So I guess every athlete has a tipping point, and when they hit a certain mileage or a certain amount of quality training, if they continue that, then they will get injured. And I was swimming up to 90 kilometres a week in the Gold Coast. And a lot of that was really intense training because it was under Dennis Cottrell.
Yep.
And that was my tipping point, 90 kilometres over the week. And it was just too much for me.
So typically what would you be able to sustain? What's your sort of sweet spot, Chloe, getting ready for a major?
It's definitely less than it should be. I can swim 50 to 60 and not have any severe injuries, but even that puts such a stress on my body that I have continuous appointments, with health professionals to try and patch me up. So there's still some weaknesses and imbalances that I, can work towards and am actively working towards, which will help me get up to a higher volume. But the difficulty I have now is that because my sport is so expensive and it's not funded by Swimming Australia or the Victorian Institute of Sport or anyone like that I need to devote nearly every waking hour to working. So I can't put in as many hours as I want to do, work on those weaknesses and put in extra hours in the pool. So it's a catch-22. I need to train a lot to be able to be physically ready for these big events, but then I'm severely limited in how many hours I can put into my marathon swimming. So it's kind of this frustrating spot that I'm in at the moment when I want to give so much, but I need to invest so much in other areas of my life.
Yeah, juggling the many hats. Is there a training session that you just love, Chloe? Most loved training session?
So, ironically, I love kicking, if we're talking about pool swimming.
Wow.
And most marathon swimmers would, get very frustrated if a big kick set was put on them. As far as open water swimming is concerned, I love crossing the English Channel as a training swim, like a single crossing. If I'm doing it that often, I can get fun. So in 2014, before the Bahamas world record, I did one crossing of the English Channel as a last long training session, and that was just so much fun because every swim I'd done before that in the English Channel, I either tried to complete a double crossing or tried to complete a triple crossing, and there was so much pressure I put on myself, rightly so, because I needed to be ready. Whereas that swim was just get in, have some fun, and then for another crossing. So sometimes I swim the channel for fun, for training swim, and that's my favourite way to swim an open water swim.
Wow, nothing like an English Channel crossing for a training swim. Chloe, pre-race meal. I mean, if you're about to race, event, challenge meal, what would you typically take on the night before, one of your crossings?
So I stick to food that's really familiar, carbohydrate based. So nothing, I don't experiment with any sort of new sorts of food, nothing spicy, nothing too fatty. It's usually pasta, if not, pizza. Because I'm taking on so much energy throughout the swim, I'm not relying on that last meal. I'm not really carbo loading as such. So I just have something that I know that will be agreeable with my stomach that I would like to eat.
Yeah, terrific. Bedtime, morning time, Chloe. What does Chloe McCardell's rhythm look like with all the training and juggling the work, as you say, every devoted hours to, funding the dream, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I usually train twice a day, though right now I'm recovering still from the 8 crossings at English Channel I did over the last few months. So it's once a day in the afternoon, and it feels a bit debaucherous only swimming once a day.
Yeah, wow.
So, yeah, it's quite good at the moment.
Oh, well, enjoy it while you can. Who's the one athlete you most admire, Chloe? And why?
I don't really have one particular athlete. Des Renford is someone I admire in English Channel swimming because he achieved so much. I mean, he did 19 English Channel crossings. They were all single crossings, and he did them over a decade. And back then in the 70s and 80s, it was just it was a mind boggle for anyone to even cross to France, let alone do it 19 times. So, he's a figurehead really of our sport, and I really admire what he's achieved. And to go after his record this year was a privilege, and I really wanted to celebrate his legend as I was going towards those crossings. So he's a big figure. And all the people that have done triple crossings, there's 3 others. I mean, I've admired them so much over the years.
Yeah, good.
John Erickson, who's passed away, Alison Streeter, who's English, and also Phil Rush from New Zealand. They were amazing swimmers.
Yeah, wow. So there's a few legends that have gone before you. And I mean, you were inducted into the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, I believe, around about the same time that Des Renford was posthumously inducted as well, just recently, right?
Yes, correct. So I was inducted in San Pedro in California into the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Des Renford was already in that, and there's also another Hall of Fame for general swimming. It's more of an umbrella organisation, and he was inducted into that one posthumously, and it was wonderful to be able to attend the night and to celebrate his life's achievements with his family. As he's passed on, he couldn't be there, but my husband and I both have been positively influenced. He was one of the driving forces for my husband to swim the English Channel because he grew up seeing Des on TV, as a larger-than-life character. So to be able to honour his legacy was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, great. So Paul's done it as well, Chloe, your hubby, Paul.
Yes. Fortunately, people ask him, how many times have you done it? Because unless you know much about channel swimming, you might just think it's normal for someone to have done more than one channel crossing. So he's like, 1? And they look at him and they're like, oh, really?
But he's in effect done every single one with you, right? So good on you, Paul. What a champion.
Yes.
Hey, Chloe, question. This is something I've been itching to ask you, and that is, how do you describe getting in the zone? So for listeners that have never been in the water immersed for anything more than a dip and in and out, or a couple of laps or whatever it might be, what's being in the zone feel like, sound like? Can you get us inside your head? Can you let us inside your head when you're in your zone? What does it feel like, etc.? Can you describe it?
Well, with open water swimming, you're really immersed in an environment that's completely natural, that's wild. So often it's quite choppy, the water. The first thing that I try and do is find a rhythm. So with my arms, with my arm strokes, I'm trying to find something that's comfortable and sustainable, that I'm not going to run out of energy at. So as I'm finding that rhythm, that starts to get me into the zone. And I know I'm in the zone when time passes and I barely notice. And I can tell time, not because I wear a watch, but because every 30 minutes I'm getting this feed coming down, which is scheduled very consistently. So if feeds come about very quickly, then I know I'm in that zone, and I know I'm successfully in that. So I've got to be in a happy place. So there's nothing upsetting me, stressing me out. I don't have any soreness in my shoulders or my neck or any other areas, and time flies, and I'm really happy. So I try and get into that zone as soon as possible, because you want to enjoy a swim when you're out there for, potentially dozens of hours, as I can be. So it's something that I'm always seeking. And if I slip out of the zone, then I try and get back in that zone. It's a really happy place where my stroke is feeling really good.
Yeah, I imagine there's been crossings in some of your swims where you've just not been in the zone at all. Is that correct?
Yes, there's been some horrific crossings, and, with open water swimming, you're so susceptible to the conditions. You have no control over water temperature, air temperature, the height of the waves, the direction the wind's hitting you, because it can hit right as you're trying to breathe. So smack bang, you got water going in your mouth as you're trying to take a breath. So being in the zone is really important, and you can't always get in there, but with practice, then you're able to switch into that zone more easily.
Yeah, brilliant. And Chloe, psychology of this? As you said earlier, you identified as a girl in your teenage years, that for you it's more about pushing your own physical performance, and that's the essence of this program. How do people discover that physical best that they've got? Is there any mantras that you would try and or recite that you just automatically start self-talking to yourself to get yourself in the zone, or just to get yourself through things? Are there any consistent ones you use? Other athletes will have different ones every time, but what about for yourself?
I don't use them a lot, but there are common ones in open water swimming. So if you're struggling with the conditions, or you're struggling mentally, then you just think about swimming one stroke at a time, because if you keep swimming one stroke at a time, then eventually you get to the other end. Or thinking about just swimming to the next feed. Because if you can keep managing going to the next feed, then you're making forward progress. So I think the mentality with open water swimming is trying to move past any current mental and physical challenges of that particular point in time, and mantras that help break it down into simple steps, just one arm stroke or just to the next feed, really simple and repetitive, and focus on that. There is one thing I do if I've got severe hypothermia and I know I need to keep going, and that's counting my strokes. So the most I've counted to is 10,600.
Wow.
And that took me about 3 hours of continuous counting, and I had to hold the figure during my feed because I wasn't swimming, but I couldn't forget where I was at, so I was very quiet. My husband was a bit worried. He's like, why is she not making eye contact and not talking? Because I had a task at hand, and that was counting my strokes. So that is something I do, I guess.
That is extraordinary. I mean, I know with my distance running, I often, I coach a lot of runners from the physio context about, break it down into 90 steps, count one leg, 90 steps, and do a packet of those, and there's your next K. So, there's something about just that stepwise approach. Chloe, what's on your bucket list personally and outside of sport?
Well, personally, one day, if I can get the funding, I'd love to go after Queen of the English Channel. So that's the lady with the most number of English Channel crossings.
Wow. And
her figure is higher than the King of the Channel, with the male with the most number of crossings. So she finished her career, this is Alison Streeter again, who did do a triple crossing years ago. She finished at 43 crossings, and I'm at 21. She's the only woman ahead of me. But that's going to take at least $250,000. So one day I would love to be able to say I've got that title, but it would take a lot to get to that point. Professionally, I focus a lot of energy on coaching, and that gives me so much intrinsic reward as well as helping fund my big crazy adventures. And I'm working with about 25 swimmers to cross the channel. So my focus is making sure that all of them get what they need out of the training and preparation program, and that they're successful, whether they're aiming for a relay or they're aiming for a solo crossing of the channel. So just continuing the success of the program that's been very high at the moment is very important to me.
And so for any listeners that have got a bit of a flutter in their tummy and something's ringing about this is a challenge, they can connect with you, Chloe, and potentially look at doing it, as a solo crossing or as a relay. Is that correct? Yeah,
that's correct. So 2017 is all filled up and swimmers are all training, but 2018 I've still got spots available for solo swimmers and those in a relay. And you don't need to know anyone else that wants to swim in a relay with you, because I find people and can put them together into relays. And the relays are either 4 persons, 5 persons, or 6-person relays. And that's kind of the next focus at the moment, is seeing who would like to join the 2018 year.
Fantastic. And can you share a story of transformation of someone that you've coached that just in your mind has had a remarkable experience in crossing the channel with your guidance?
I definitely have a few. So there was one lady who, for her 60th birthday, wanted to be in a relay across the English Channel. So she signed up, and she'd never swum in open water before joining our program. And the first time she got in for the night swim, because we swim at night to emulate what it's like in the English Channel, it's pitch black, you can't see where you're going, and she was terrified. And she was getting a bit of anxiety in open water races, like the 1 or 2 kilometre races that the swimmers can enter in the open water. And by the end of the program, she was in the English Channel in a team of 4, so it's quite a small team. And she did so well, and her confidence and sense of achievement and empowerment just went through the roof. So it was a really life-changing experience for her, and all that positive energy that she had, and the other swimmers in the program. It's just amazing. It's contagious. I'm around all this great energy. So I love it when my swimmers have huge transformations. I get so much out of it personally, and love to see how far they've come as well.
And you mentioned at the start, I think you get almost more satisfaction out of seeing what others can achieve through your guidance, as opposed to ticking the boxes yourself, Chloe. I mean, there's a difference, and how is that for you?
Yes, I probably do get more satisfaction in seeing them cross the English Channel, because I know how far they've come. I think I have more perspective about their journeys than I have of my own. And I have such high expectations of myself, and so much of what I do is just me pushing the envelope so much that in a way it's kind of a torturous journey that I'm on. I don't really get to enjoy a lot of it. Whereas with their journeys, I have a bit more of a distance, a bit more of a perspective, and yeah, I definitely enjoy being there and celebrating with them at the end.
Yeah, wow. And torturous journey, is that the torturous one because of the physicality of it? I mean, you're swimming in cold water, you're doing night swims, you're training many kilometres, you're working, full time around the training. Is it torturous just in that sense, or is it more there's some degree of torture of dealing with the expectations that probably more than anyone you put on, yourself, because you know the potential that lays within you? Yeah,
it's all that you've said and more. That physical torture of training, the hours, the kilometres, the cold water. I don't mind so much the night swimming. Then the pressure I put on myself, because I really only get one chance a year to do a big swim, because physically I'm buggered for months afterwards. So I only get one chance a year to peak, and it could be out of my control, the outcome, if it's just a terrible day. So having no control over just the opportunity to reach my goals is quite frustrating. And then also the financial struggle, which is it's ongoing, and that's really, really tough as well. Not just on me, but, my husband as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a credit to you. I mean, I know over the years since I last had contact with you up here on the Gold Coast, it's the very practical reality that underpins, obviously, the ambition, the talent, the motivations there. So it's a duality, isn't it? So if there's any big corporates listening to the program and something's ringing, we'll make sure we can drop Chloe's contacts in the show notes and get behind Chloe in any way we can. Chloe, nearly there, nearly to the other side of the channel, right? Couple of key questions. What's one bit of advice across all sports, if you could boil it down to one bit of advice to help people perform at their physical best, what would it be?
Self-belief. Because if you don't believe in yourself, you can't achieve your goals. Beautiful.
Chloe, bit of a fun question. If you could have dinner with 3 people, living or past, who would they be and why?
Gertrude Ederle, the first woman to swim the English Channel. Gandhi. And I think that's it. Just 2.
Just 2. What about that third seat? There's got to be someone.
Well, I'd invite you to dinner, Brad, if you're around.
Oh, well, that'd be great. Well, I'll come. Paul's got to join us too. We can have the same seat. So, Chloe, I'm there. I'll do my research a bit more on Gandhi and Gertrude, was it? I'd have to get a bit more up to date with her achievement, and then I could feel like I could contribute to the conversation. But I would delightfully take a place, Chloe. Listeners that want to find out more about your coaching, about the cross-ins, about your journey, where can we find you online and on social?
So I have a website, chloemccardel.com, which I'm sure you'll put up. I'm on Facebook as well, Chloe McCardel Marathon Swimmer. I'm around a lot of open water events in Victoria over the summer season. I don't know, I love connecting with the open water swimming community. So people drop me notes all the time. I'm around. If you want to contact me, you'll be able to find a way to find my details. So I'm out there. I love chatting swimming, especially open water swimming. And if you love the idea of a channel, relay or solo, then I could talk all day about it to you.
Well, you're the most credentialed person on this continent of Australia, and if not one of the in the world. So, and Chloe, that queen of the channel, I just think that crown needs to be on your head. I can see it on your head, Chloe. Physical challenge for the week. We like to finish the show each week, Chloe, with the guest issuing listeners a challenge. It can be very easy. It can be very challenging. What will it be? What will listeners need to do over the next week? And they can tag both you and I in to their completion of the challenge. Anything that you would issue?
I reckon the challenge should be for those that are maybe a little bit nervous about swimming in the open water, to find a buddy that has swum in the open water before and is confident, and to swim 1 kilometre with them in the open water.
So 1K open water, and throw that up online, maybe a photo of you coming out of the water or something for a bit of photographic evidence, and tag Chloe and I, and that'd be great. Chloe, I just want to say thank you for your time. I remember when I had contact with you several years ago. You're a person that those that meet you, I don't think, can ever forget. You're so determined. You're full of life and energy, and I think what you've achieved is just remarkable. And just for people to expand their possibilities in terms of thinking, I mean, that in itself is a great gift to the world. So thank you, Chloe McCardel. You're an absolute champion. Thanks
very much, Brad. It's been great chatting.
So, listeners, there you have it. Another episode of the Physical Performance Show featuring Chloe McCardel. Big thank you to Chloe, and also to listeners who have been leaving reviews. If you're yet to do so, please jump over ahead of next week's show. That'll help us enormously in getting this program more visible in more earbuds. Coming up next week on the Physical Performance Show, I catch up with Madeline Hills, knee highner. Madeline Hills is an Australian running sensation who has an incredible story, having had a successful junior athletic career before taking an 8-year hiatus from the sport, only to return to within really 16 months of training be on the team for the Rio Olympic Games, representing Australia in the 3,000 metre steeplechase and also the 5,000 metres. In both events, Madeline went on to finish in 7th and 10th respectively. And Madeline shares around how she was able to straddle both a professional pharmacy career combined with her elite running aspirations up until the Rio Olympic Games. Madeline also shares around her beginnings of running, how she fell out of love with the sport, and performance tips that'll certainly have you both inspired and informed. So join me next week on the Physical Performance Show. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. This has been the Physical Performance Show, and I'm Brad Beard.